If ever your life could be a true crime podcast episode, then this podcast is for you. We're about to embark on a roller coaster of emotions, insights, survival, and stories about escape. So buckle up and let the journey begin.
I wish I'd gotten cold foam.
Cold foam is the best.
I could swim in cold foam.
What did I see? Oh, you know what? When we took our road trip to go see my son's senior recital, my daughter brought me a matcha latte, a little small one because clearly I'm not supposed to have it, and it had lavender cold foam. That was an amazing combination.
I believe that. Yeah.
So I shared it with my husband just so I was mitigating the effects of the caffeine on my system, who revolts. And it was just a nice little driving across multiple states.
Yeah.
Drinking this lovely green lavender thing. And
Ooh, speaking of, hey, welcome to the Escape Pod. You escaped.
Hi, Julie.
Literally.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Tornadoes. A bunch of them.
I called her Dorothy when she came home, but really...
Hey, I'm wearing my red shoes today.
Her name is Charity, and I'm Julie, and you're in the Escape Pod. We're going now.
It's not Dorothy. You can call me Dorothy.
On Monday when I was like, you're back. Hey, Dorothy, where's Toto? You survived multiple tornadoes.
Yes.
From afar. You weren't like
bananas.
in it, right?
We're not in it. Maybe within 5 or 10 miles.
That's still scary.
So we're
5 or 10 miles too close for me.
Driving to go to Lincoln to see our son's final undergraduate recital, right? And he starts sending freak out texts. So I've got my daughter's convoying with us. She's got the dog with high anxiety. So she's got her car. They're not in the car with us. So they're behind us. And I've got the walkie-talkie in one hand and my cell phone in the other hand. And my son starts texting, "Are you guys okay? Are you guys okay?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "The tornadoes." And I'm like looking around going, "What tornadoes?" And then I went, "Whoa," because I just hadn't looked up. I was like decompressing from work and just like my husband drove the whole way. So I'm just enjoying the ride and vibing and listening to music. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I look up and off in the distance, not that far away, there was like it looked like a little finger or a comma hanging in the sky. And then it just within seconds got long and hit the ground. And then it was like whack-a-mole. They just started popping up everywhere. And then I looked over to my right and there was a big one. And that's what had hit the interstate that we were on about 20 minutes before we got there.
Wow.
So we got to see the damage from that. But yeah, before we knew it was tornadoes, the GPS kept trying to kick us off the interstate, but it didn't tell us why.
Wow. Okay.
Just like all these weird things were happening. And then here's my husband driving. Now, cops are trained to do this so they can like be on the computer and drive and be on the phone all at the same time. And it still freaks me out. So he's got his phone and he's trying to record the tornadoes. And you can hear me going, "Stop it. Just stop it." And he's like, "This is he was having so much fun." I'm like, "Living your best life, dude." Okay. He's like, "I've waited my whole life to see real life tornadoes." And I've been in a tornado. So as a kid, literally in our backyard, and it was terrifying. And he's just like living it up, having such a blast. And so, yeah. And then there's my son. When I finally get on the phone with him, they let us out of school and they all stood outside. Not all of them, but half of them stood outside looking for the tornadoes. Yeah. And one of them touched down right on campus. So
That's
not
wild.
Too far, maybe like a 10-minute walk from where he was standing and watching. But
I have never seen a tornado. I will tell this story about my brother, though. He was in Colorado several years ago, and we are born and raised in South Dakota, but in the Black Hills area. We have had tornadoes in the Black Hills, usually smaller, not a ton of damage, that kind of thing. But they tend to, when you hear about tornadoes in South Dakota, 90% of the time or more, they're going to be east of the Missouri River.
Plains, yeah.
Exactly. So he was in Colorado, and by God, he was headed to drop his son off at daycare. I think Matt would have been probably 3 years old at the time-ish. And I think there were like warnings coming over the radio, and he saw it. Michael saw it and commented, oh my gosh, it's an effing tornado. To which his toddler son replied, what's an effing tornado? And he was like, oh my gosh. So
Teachable moment, baby.
right. I think he just let it go because he's just like, if I don't respond, he will not remember this. And they did end up, I can't remember where he took shelter, but my sister-in-law had taken shelter in the basement of a country club, which she only knew that that was a place that had a basement because a friend of mine from growing up had gone to a college in a neighboring town in Colorado, and that's where her wedding reception was, like the year before.
Okay.
And so we had told them, like, you know, the reception was in the basement of this country club. And so she just knew, like, I got to find some place to be because it was getting close. And so she pulled over and she actually sheltered, I think, in the basement of this country club that they really knew nothing about, except they knew that that's where this wedding reception had been with a basement. So everybody was fine. And I do think there was a loss of life actually in that storm. This was many years ago. And I'm not sure one of them wasn't like a heart attack out of like shock potentially. Sure. So it was a unique situation, but I still remember his boss at the time or coworkers were like, you're from South Dakota. Haven't you seen tornadoes? And he just was like, I am not from that part of South Dakota. Like, no, this is wild.
No, we had him in Louisiana for sure.
For sure. Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you escaped. Anything else you're escaping from?
Yes, 2 things. Chia seeds.
Oh.
I love chia seeds.
Do you?
But I have like the teeth where they just hide. And then even after I brush my teeth, it's like they just keep popping up. Damn little things. They're like good, escape artists or escaping being caught and expelled from my mouth. And then the other thing is I'm still floored because I still don't remember it. Do you remember our conversation last week where, because you know I've been doing pretty much nothing but grant writing for months now. And we talked about a grant and you told me I wrote it and I have zero recollection of writing it. Like, this is when you know you're hitting a wall.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, I'm working on this last one and this is going to be the last one for a good long while because I don't think I can mentally handle anymore. So that's what I'm working to escape.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Or are you trying to escape?
I successfully, I believe, because we're like 24 hours or more past anybody being sick in my house.
Oh.
We did have the stomach bug move through. My youngest was super sick 3 days last week. And then my husband didn't feel well over the weekend, but he ended up being okay. But you could tell like 2 days he's like, did not eat much, did not do much, was not good. And then I thought the older son and I were in the clear because it had been a couple of days since anything had happened. And then he got sick late one night, but he woke up the next day and he's like, no, I'm good. So it just was a very quick. I think the little one had it the worst because he's little, like he just couldn't fight it off as much. Yeah. But I, knock on whatever material this desk is, nothing.
Well, you came to work today and said you were trying to get rid of 2 boys, so
I was ready to. Okay, I hesitate to say this in light of recent recordings we've done with people literally selling their children. I won't actually sell my children, but I did. There was a part of me that wanted to.
Needed a timeout.
I wanted to go like. I told one, it was nice out. I was like,
wanted to have kids. Why?
One of you go outside. Oh, you know, I told them like, I don't know, it was probably like 2 weeks ago. I made a crack about how, well, your dad's really the one who wanted to have kids. And they were like, oh, horrified.
That's funny.
And then they had all the, like, you didn't want us? And I'm like, okay.
That's going to come back to bite you.
That's not what I said. I said your dad was the one who was more excited about
to start a family.
To start a family. I knew it would be a lot of work, and he was unaware of how much work it would be. And so this is where we are. But yeah, they were like shock to the system that their mother would ever say that. I'm super happy we had them, and I love them dearly. But they were bickering for the 30 minutes before we left the house this morning, and I was over it. So I'm here, and this little escape podcast suite is amazing.
It is.
I like it.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tell me a story of true crime.
Okay, I'm calling this one today For Whom the Bells Toll.
Okay.
Okay, on purpose. We have a Belle Gibson and we have a Bella Johnston. So it's going to be, okay.
Keep up, people. Keep up.
Gotta
notes.
keep up. Yeah. So this was born out of, I was thinking about this influencer phase. We'll see people, like we talked about it with, what was her name? Samantha Wolford. Like that's what she wanted to do, is to, be an influencer and an actress. And I know some people legitimately make money doing this stuff, but then these are people who presumably are marketing savvy or, art style, whatever savvy, that could actually be taking jobs in these industries instead of creating their own. So why is our workforce so deficient? Because everybody wants to be an influencer and they're chasing these things down. I mean, possibly is one contributing factor to it, right? So this one's really interesting because this is kind of before everybody wanted to be an influencer. And so I don't know if what happens in this story was like 100% intentional from the beginning, or if something just started happening and then it was like, oh, I can make a lot of money doing this. So I'll let you decide. But here we go. All right. So this is back in 2013 in Australia. We're going to go to the other side of the planet. Bella Johnston at the time was a 17-year-old dying of cancer.
Ooh.
Yeah. And this poor girl had been put through it with the doctors. She'd been ill for years. Doctors kept incorrectly chalking her symptoms up to an eating disorder. So she's being treated for an eating disorder, but not seeing any improvements in her condition because it wasn't an eating disorder. Her treatments included being force-fed. She was being supervised all the time, like 24 hours a day. And meanwhile, her health kept declining. She was losing weight. She was unable to eat or sleep, and no one was taking her seriously when she would tell them that it was something else that was wrong. And sometimes we have to be our own best advocates. I mean, I've taken multiple doctors on over my own health and my son's health at various times. Like, you're not listening. You need to listen.
Yeah.
I know my body better than you do. I don't care what degree you have. You need to listen. And they really do. But they were not issuing her MRIs or scans of any sort. So she finally goes to a naturopath who tells her that the lumps in her neck were blocked glands. Ready? Because of getting tattoos.
Ooh.
Yeah. I'm not saying there's any validity to this. I'm just saying this is what a, quote, naturopath told Bella. This is why her glands were blocked. Couldn't possibly be cancer because you got tattoos. So, okay, so keep that in mind. So this goes on for quite some time, and Bella decides to take matters into her own hands. Like, go girl. She starts doing her research. And as I think anyone who is not getting the answers they need or are bringing them comfort from the medical profession or should do. And she comes across a testimonial from a woman now named Belle Gibson, who reportedly had beat a myriad of serious health issues, including inoperable brain cancer, through natural medicine and foods in a system called the Gerson therapy, which was a regimen advocated by its supporters to treat cancer and other degenerative diseases, and kind of consists of a specialized diet that detoxifies the body and rebuilds the immune system. So it's like adding vitamins and mineral supplements to help assist the processes of detoxifying the body. So basically, it's just a very clean lifestyle.
Sure.
And so, I mean, if you're desperate and, naturopath is telling you it's because you got tattoos, well, you can't undo that, really, ever. So she became hopeful for the first time in a long time, and she started following Belle's lifestyle through an app called the Whole Pantry.
Okay.
So this is an app that Belle Gibson developed, and it also had like an accompanying cookbook. So it was kind of like this whole lifestyle system where you had all those references. You knew where to look. You could quit researching because it was pretty complete and holistic, if you will. So now the young girl, Bella, was consuming beetroot soup, green drinks, bone broth. I've done all these things just for general health, but she's doing these every day because like her life depends on it, and she's still not getting better. We know now it's because she was not diagnosed, right? Yet. Okay. So she wasn't being treated for her cancer. And so in 2014, remember those neck lumps I mentioned? As you probably guessed, they were tumors. It had nothing to do with these tattoos. And so she was finally diagnosed with a rare neck tumor condition. And this is right at the base of her skull. Ooh. So she undergoes a 10-hour surgery, and this procedure left her with nerve damage and facial paralysis because the cancer was everywhere.
Oh, no.
And if they'd caught it in time and the doctors had done their job and actually, and I know, 17-year-old, you're not thinking a 17-year-old, generally cancer is not going to be the first thing you look for. Right. But still, when someone is telling you, your answers to me are not making sense, I'm still not seeing results, you're not treating me for the right thing, something else is wrong, you need to listen. Yeah. And that just unfortunately didn't happen until it was too late with her. So then she begins radiation treatment, but she's still following Belle Gibson's method of helping the body fight cancer.
Okay.
So are we tracking so far?
Yep.
Okay. So in interviews with Bella, she said it made her feel closer to Belle because now that she'd been formally diagnosed with cancer, just like Belle said she'd had, if Belle beat it, then maybe Bella could beat it too, right? So it gave her hope, and that's a lot of it too. I mean, it's mindset in a lot of people. You know, if for people who just feel, doom and gloom and it's never going to happen,
right?
Those toxic stress chemicals do contribute and exacerbate the condition, right? And there's so many cases of mind over matter and those types of things where attitude helps the healing journey and so on and so forth. Okay, now Kylie Wiley. That's a fun name.
That's amazing.
Isn't that fun? She was another woman who was suffering from lymphoma. She abandoned chemotherapy and painful lumbar injections that she was having to get frequently to follow Belle's lifestyle in the hopes of healing herself just like Belle did. So now we have another follower. Another one, Maxine Ali, abandoned prescription steroid medication she was on for ulcerative colitis to follow in Belle's footsteps, and so many others. There's long lists of people who followed suit because Belle's story was such an inspiration for people who were dying and desperate to regain their health and just live some measure of a better quality of life. So her regimen kind of looked like fruits and vegetables, no gluten, no coffee, which that sounds like me so far. No meat. That was me for about 13 years. No prepared food with more than 5 ingredients. No dairy. No refined sugar. I mean, it sounds like it makes sense, right? It sounds like common sense. So keep all of that in mind, and we're gonna tangent now and go into Belle Gibson's story. So the one who was inspiring all of these people who had presumably fatal conditions or terminal conditions to change their lifestyles. So Belle was born in October of 1991. And
she's young.
She was young also.
Okay.
Young, very beautiful girl. So imagine learning you had an inoperable brain tumor and you had only 4 months to live. I mean, pretty terrifying. I mean, we had this something similar happen with one of our staff members not too long ago, right?
Yep.
She had 3 heart operations. She had suffered 2 heart attacks. She died on the operating table twice, had a stroke, had a malignant blood, brain, spleen, uterine, liver, and kidney cancers.
That doesn't even seem...
You're making a face.
Possible.
Well, you're going to find out. Spoiler alert. Maybe it wasn't. Okay. All of this would have been when she was around 18 years old.
Okay.
And all of this before the brain cancer that she kind of became popular for, and, and part of her storytelling with regard to the tools and the cookbook and stuff that she was selling. So one would think terrible luck, right? So she starts this particular food regimen and heals herself. And she gets so excited about that she starts posting to social media to share with others, as one would want to sing from the rooftops. I wouldn't use social media like that, but
people do.
And I mean, what an inspirational story. So she grows in popularity very quickly. And then actually gets an app developed that supports this whole lifestyle instead of just posts where people are kind of following this. Now it's like a whole app that you can reference for any of these dietary needs and, recipes and things like that. And so it helps people follow her lifestyle. And then, she gets a cookbook deal out of this and the whole thing. So now she's 21 and she's rolling in dough. Those lifestyle things working for her. People loved her. They saw her as this young, beautiful, successful mom who beat all the odds.
Mm-hmm.
And they want that too.
Of course.
I mean, and she is. She's still an incredibly pretty woman. And, so she starts gaining in notoriety and starts getting invited to all sorts of causes and becomes the poster girl for like health and inspiration and hope. She pledges a lot of the money that is coming into her way now to various charities, like $300,000 or so. So like just an all around good person. Like we want to jump on the Belle bandwagon because she's done something miraculous and is now trying to help other people do the same thing. So alarm bells start going off when these charities never receive their pledges.
Man.
And being a nonprofit, I mean, we did have this happen in the past where some money that was obligated to us was threatened to not come in, right? And that's a game changer for nonprofits. So they started raising the alarm, understandably so. Okay.
As they should.
And so the proper people started to investigate and things just weren't adding up. For instance, Belle didn't have any scars from all these surgeries she claims she'd had.
Mm-hmm.
And none of her doctors are actually doctors. So these people she were listing as doctors, when people started investigating this, they were not actually doctors. And then as they would go and look at the footage of her interviews, her diagnoses change, her doctors change. Okay. She also has, they also found lavish shopping habits, obviously not honoring her charitable commitment. So it's not looking good for her, right? She even had held a fundraiser for the family of a young boy with brain cancer, like real, actual young boy with real, actual brain cancer. And they never received the money.
Oh,
I mean,
that's awful.
That is awful. Ugh. Special place in hell. So it's soon discovered, as I'm sure you're figuring out, Belle's story was entirely fake. In late April 2015, she gave an interview to the Australian Women's Weekly in which she finally admitted to having fabricated all her cancer claims. But she never had cancer in any of the dozens of varieties she claimed to have had. She never had a stroke. She never died on the operating table. She never had a bad heart. None of it was true. None of it was true.
Man.
Okay, so why all the lies? Like what prompted or caused this? So she attributed her deceit to her upbringing. Okay. And specifically to neglect by her now estranged mother, claiming to have been forced to take care of herself, her mother who had MS, and her autistic brother since the age of 5. So she was kind of the, sacrificing her childhood, so she says, to take care of her mom and her younger brother.
Okay, so do we know if those things are true?
I think these things were true.
Okay, you have no reason to believe they were not true.
Not at this point.
Okay.
And since I wrote these notes so long ago, I might just walk that back by the end of this because it wouldn't surprise me. So she claims she had to walk to school on her own. She had to make her own lunches. Oh, the horror. I mean, oh my God. She had to clean the house, do the grocery shopping, do the laundry, arrange medical appointments, and pick up her brother. I mean,
not ideal, like not really a kid just getting to be a kid, but also not a reason to lie about a cancer diagnosis.
Well, you know what? Hey, mom did not ask for MS.
Right.
And sorry, you can't help who you're born to, but I mean, mom's not abusing her. She needs some help and maybe potentially can't afford some live-in or, residential care or whatever. I mean, you got to do what you got to do. But like, she's, for all all that I could find. She's not being abused
Right.
or, she's just having to be responsible.
Yeah.
I mean, what a freaking concept, right? Okay. So she also says she never knew her father. She was also stalked during her teenage years when she lived in Perth. But then Belle's mother comes out later and refuted several of the claims Belle had made about her family, including the false claim, here we go, that her brother was autistic. So that was also bullshit. An interview in Australian Women's Weekly, Gibson's mom, who's Natalie Del Bello, so also last name with another Belle, which is just interesting, says that she does have MS, but the rest of her daughter's claims were not true.
Interesting.
What a lot of rubbish, she said. Belle never cared for me, and her brother is not autistic, and she's barely done a minute's housework in her life. I've practically worked myself into an early grave to give that girl everything she wanted in life.
Interesting.
Maybe that's the problem.
Maybe just a habitual liar.
Yeah. Spoiled. I'm going to get what I want. Like, who knows? So September 2017, Gibson was fined $410,000 by the Australian government for falsely claiming that she would be donating money to charity. And she was found guilty of 5 breaches of consumer law. But she claims she could not pay the fines.
Huh.
So in a wild plot twist, wait, what are you thinking so far? Because this is going to get fun.
I think she spent all the money on... You said she had a shopping habit.
She had a shopping habit.
Yeah, so I would guess there's no money to give back.
Gorgeous apartment or house, whatever it was. I mean, like just live in a really nice, I'm going to go do yoga every day at a studio and drink my fresh pressed fruit juices and whatever.
I'm sure that's exactly what she sounds like.
No, actually, she sounds kind of whiny.
Okay.
When she's being interviewed, it's kind of like, well, I don't really think I did anything wrong. No, see, that's not what I said. You're twisting my words.
Oh.
Like, no, I'm just saying that this is what someone else told me I had. So why did I would have had no reason not to believe them. She would not own it at all. It was really wild.
All right.
Okay, so now she's backed against a wall. She owes all this money. She hasn't paid these charities. She screwed over this family with the little boy that she did the fundraiser for. Now she's being fined by the government. And she can't make good on any of these. So, as one would do in similar situations, she joined an Ethiopian community in Victoria, Melbourne. Now she's wearing a headscarf, speaking partially Oromo, and changing her name to Sanbantu.
Okay.
I don't know how she thinks this is going to get her out of it.
Right.
But maybe it's like, oh, I'm a different person now, or she's incognito or something. Or now that I'm part of a marginalized group, maybe you can't come after. Oh, who knows what she's certifiable. But
I just think, and you do hear these stories sometimes, like people get in trouble and suddenly like they do kind of like radical
that was my twin
changes.
sister. She looks just like me. I have a doppelganger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, go on.
Well, here, the leader of this community, though, this Ethiopian community, issued a statement, an official statement, cutting ties, and asked her to stop saying she's part of their community. Can we do that?
Good for her.
Can we do that in our community?
We can't.
Okay.
I mean, we could, but
Anyway.
it's more PR work than I want to have to
The
do.
things that make you just, Okay. Anyway, so she claims that when she created her app and wrote the book, she thought she had brain cancer. She thought she had brain cancer. So therefore, all of this was legitimate. She claims she underwent the chemotherapy and radiation for 2 months for this condition. She was allegedly taking oral chemotherapy by the doctors, issued by the doctors who weren't really doctors, ? I mean.
Tic Tacs?
Yeah, maybe. Tic Tacs cure everything. Come on,
Maybe.
Julie.
Bad breath.
They cure all the stuff. All right, so interviews with her are super interesting to watch because she's clearly trying to save face while simultaneously trying to do the right thing and own the fact that she lied about everything. But those two things just they can't occupy the same space.
Yeah.
So it is really like a person glitching out when you watch her, like her face and listen to her voice. And it's just this really sugary sweet,
Well, this whole thing reminds me a little bit
off the wall
of the Elizabeth Holmes Theranos, the blood tester kits that she's in prison for fraud, basically, because at one point the company was valued very high. She had oodles of investors. And
what were these?
They were a way to test blood with a fingerprint. It was like basically with a drop of blood, we could tell you all these things wrong with you.
Oh, like health diagnoses.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And that it would be run through this machine. And now off the top of my head, I can't remember what they called the machine. It had a name and it didn't actually work. I mean, in theory, like the idea was, something worth like pursuing as far as, can we make it so that like people don't can get more out of like a blood test? Can we, like advancing health technology? But bottom line, what she was creating and her company was creating didn't work. And in very similar circumstances.
Did she even ever deliver a product, or was it like?
Well, so like there were not pharmaceutical companies, drugstores, a couple of them that they had a contract with, and these things were there and they were not doing what they said they could do.
Oh, interesting.
And she is in prison for it. But same thing where people who knew her, her voice was different at the time she was making the sale. She really had, a lot of people, the theory is kind of an obsession with Steve Jobs. And so she was known for the black turtleneck, the very basic style. She's beautiful woman. And, she was a salesperson, man. I mean, she got high-ranking people in our country to invest a lot of money in this. And it never worked. And there were a couple very young people in the company who had to whistleblow. And that was the undoing. And eventually,
so
all
they
of
knew
this
all
happened.
along that this was
didn't when they first got hired on. They didn't, but it didn't take very long for them to realize like, this isn't working and we can't, like a finger prick is not enough. And there were other people. There was actually, she had dropped out of Stanford, and that was part of her whole story was,
so she really was just trying to create this Steve Jobs.
It was an image.
Yeah.
Yep. Very much an image. And she was very successful at doing it, but not successful at making the technology work. And so these young people went in and they were very excited. And she was becoming more and more well-known in this world. And it didn't take them very long to be like, oh my gosh, this product doesn't work.
Eek.
And they had to eventually, find ways to get information to people who could do something about it. And eventually there was a massive, I think, investigative report that came out first. And there were some investigations going on, government-wise, with just...
But she was aware that it didn't work, and she just kept pushing forward?
That's...
Okay. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not like... I developed it. I believed that it was effective.
I think initially the theory was fine, like, let's try it. Let's see what we could make work. But then she claimed it worked that when it didn't work.
Okay. So she just kept moving the narrative forward. Okay.
And taken a lot of money to continue to promote the technology. And
well, then never mind. It should have gone into additional research and development and tried to.
And it was never, and they were very closed doors. So like if people would come in, they would only show them certain parts of like the lab where things were being done.
That's not suspicious at all.
Oh, it was wild.
Do you remember, since you're a reporter, like it may have been while you were still in the news, there was something like that happened here locally with people who were basically snake oiling it with the community.
It was a medical thing too, wasn't it?
It was a medical thing. Do you remember?
Yep,
I don't quite remember the
that.
details, but they got in big trouble.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So bottom line, folks, it doesn't pay to.
No.
I mean, you can maybe get away with being a snake oil salesman back in the 1910s, but.
Well, I think even now you might get away with it for a while, but you're probably not. Eventually, you're
I mean, hey, listen,
going to be
if
found
you have a
out.
crazy idea and a terminal illness, you have nothing to lose. Go for it.
Unless you don't have a terminal illness, and then you
Well,
got to live with it.
Yeah, Belle screwed up. All right, so back to some of the victims of Belle's lies. So Bella, the first one, the 17-year-old that we talked about, when she found out about all these lies, she was livid.
Yeah.
I mean, she said, you're not just saying that you're sick, but you're actually curing an incurable disease and obtaining financial gain from it. That is the most unethical thing you could possibly do, she said. But now she says she kind of pities Belle. She says, I think that she clearly has never had a good friend or obviously doesn't have a group of people to keep her grounded.
Yeah.
And further, she speculates that the whole thing was a way to connect with people and get positive attention.
Yeah.
And it spiraled out of control. So again, thinking it back to me blowing up the bus or potentially blowing up the bus to get that attention. I still say if social media had existed when I was that age, who knows where I would be?
Right.
Like seriously, especially with like all the alcohol abuse and the things that I did and the blackout phases and all that. Anyway, spiraled out of control for Belle. And after her own health journey, she encourages people to get second opinions and be their own advocates, like we were talking earlier about when it comes to their health. If you think there's something wrong, get it figured out. I'd alluded to earlier that I'd taken on some doctors over some things. So we kind of talked about this a little bit when your boys were sick. But my son, when he was in grade school, went through this phase where he would like throw up.
Mm-hmm.
And then like be okay for a couple days and then throw up and then be okay and this just kept going on. I'm like, what the heck is going on? So I finally take him in and the doctor says to me, well, we need to refer your son to a pediatric gastroenterologist in Denver. And I'm like, but why? Well, we don't know. Why are you going to refer me to Denver when you don't know what's going on with him? Mm-hmm. And so anyway, he prescribed something, and I'm like, but you just told me you can't diagnose him. And I don't remember what the prescription was, but I'm like, I'm not going to fill this. Like, you're telling me you don't know what's wrong with him, and you're giving me a drug, and you're sending me to another doctor. Like, this doesn't shake out to me. Mm-hmm. So instead, I went to my chiropractor, and I just told her, listen, Lisa, like, here's the deal. And she goes, I bet it's strep. And I'm like, what? She goes, listen, I have a family. They have like 5 kids. When strep goes through, all 5 kids display different symptoms. And this is one of those patterns. I'm like, strep? Because I'd never heard of.
Yeah.
And she's like, yep. So I took him back in, got him tested for strep, but that's what it was.
That's crazy.
And the doctor was mortified. He's like, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. And he'd been practicing medicine for decades and just had never, it just didn't look like strep. So he didn't think to do it. But again, you don't prescribe a medication.
Right.
And I'm like, what if we had
like
gone
hoping
to
for the
Denver
best
and wasted all this money and
for
strep, right? So anyway.
My sister diagnosed my son's ear infection once when he was little. He had goo coming out of his eye. And I was like, I don't understand. She's like, he has an ear infection. Yeah. And she said, and she was an engineer and a swim coach. Like, odd combination, but that's her. But she'd had kids of her own. And she said, when the infection runs out of places to go, it oozes out where it can.
Yeah.
And I went to the pediatrician and said to the nurse, my sister thinks it's an ear infection. And the nurse said, your sister is very smart. And I said, yes. And that is exactly what it was. He was kind of asymptomatic other than that. But like the things that they always say kids do, pulling at the ear. I can't remember didn't have a fever. So 2 key things.
Yeah. Same thing with
strep.
Just,
And
and
so
then vomiting, like it made no sense.
Yeah, that is odd. I don't know that I've ever heard of that with strep, but just interesting what goes on with people. Very compassionate of Bella to recognize like this influencer.
This girl needs to feel loved.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. So Kylie, when she found out, she felt super betrayed about Belle being a fraud. But she'd been desperate. I mean, no one can blame her for trying this, right? She had been undergoing chemotherapy daily. She'd lost her hair. She'd suffered 17 lumbar injections, and she was just miserable. So then she sees this young, beautiful girl who had allegedly suffered some of the worst things a human body can go through. And of course, she decided to try it. But again, she felt betrayed.
Yeah.
Betrayed. She trusted this person. It gave her hope, and it was all for nothing. Maxine Ali, she became desperately ill and underweight by following Belle's lifestyle. And she was frustrated because she was following all of the rules, like to a T, not seeing any improvement. And within a year of following this regimen, she no longer had her monthly periods. She was hungry all the time and feeling more and more run down. She said, I felt like a failure. Like, and I get that when you're going through like a structured, disciplined workout or diet routine and you're not getting those results, it is infuriating, right? Yeah. It's really frustrating. And then like you're already sick and now you're feeling like a failure on top of it, all because you put your trust in somebody who was happy to take it when you were the most vulnerable point in your life, right? So they felt stupid. They felt ashamed. They were angry. People claimed they lost loved ones who were sick and following Belle's way of life. I couldn't find anything that said it actually right. But I mean, I get it. Family members, they should be mad. So again, she was fined $410,000 in federal court in Australia for misleading and deceptive conduct. She's previously appeared in court saying she's unable to pay the fine, despite a financial analysis showing she spent about $91,000 in 2 years on clothes, cosmetics, and holidays. I don't even know what that would look like.
I was just about to say that. Like, how?
Well, I
mean, that takes some effort.
I have a tiny closet, so I don't know where this stuff would go. So now she's up to about $500,000 in fines, penalties, and interests. And, you know, so there's certainly victims here, and the toll,
sure,
especially being on social media, the number may never, ever be known. But I do have to wonder about what led to the habitual lying. Like, what need was she trying to get met? Yeah. I mean, her mom refutes pretty much everything she said. Former classmates would say that she would fake injuries, like put her arm in a sling, or she'd post to social media saying she was in the hospital. None of it was true, but she'd get that attention.
Yep.
Whatever that fed
negative
for her,
attention, still attention.
Well, I mean, but it's that sympathetic, right? Like, oh my gosh, you know, what do you need? We're here for you, kind of a thing.
So is it classic? Like, would this be like Munchausen's? Although she wasn't hurting herself, she was just claiming to. Okay, never mind. Ignore me, people.
Yep. So I wanted to find out a little bit more about pathological lying. So according to the Newport Institute, compulsive lying or pathological lying can also be a symptom of antisocial personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder.
Yeah, I can see that.
So people with these personality disorders may lie to gain sympathy or social status or to preserve a false sense of self. That really seems to be applicable in her case. Pathological liar signs can also be symptoms of borderline personality disorder. And with BPD, lying is often a way to avoid rejection or abandonment.
Yeah.
And in some cases, it can be a result of childhood trauma, such as neglect or abuse. We don't think this was relevant in her case. But people who didn't get their needs met as children may begin lying as a coping mechanism in an attempt to get the love and reassurance they crave. Or in, thinking back to what I just said, that love, not knowing her dad. I mean, we all know some of the crazy things I did because I wanted my dad's attention. I did have him in my life. If I hadn't had him in my life, I wonder how much more amped up that may have been. Those behaviors may have been. Or people may internalize the message early on that they're not good enough as they are, so they lie to hide what they see as like these unforgivable personality flaws that make them unworthy of other people's love or whatever. So I remember going through stages of this as a kid, clearly not to this extent of influencing a bajillion people, right? But in early grade school, I'm thinking second grade maybe, I would tell kids ghost stories on the school bus. I've always had like a really
wild
active,
imagination,
disturbing sometimes imagination. And I would put these stories off as totally true. So much so that my parents would get calls from other kids' parents or the school because I was scaring their kids. So I finally had to stop. And then I went through a phase after my grandmother died. I don't even think... Yeah, this one's my husband doesn't know this. So he said, okay, if you're going to do this podcast, you better tell me things ahead of time. I'm like, well, we're in it now, buddy. So
there'll be time before this is posted.
Well,
to tell him
he's in out of town right now. So anyway, we've talked before about my grandmother being my person, my rock, my anchor, my safe harbor, if you will. And when she died, when she was only like 48 years old, it wrecked me. And so I didn't have any longer that attention. I mean, my parents were very self-involved and involved with each other, but like the kids, well, whatever. They're not dead, so they're okay. And so I had a good rapport with my, I think, 7th or 8th grade PE teacher. And so I told her I was pregnant, even though I hadn't ever had sex with anybody yet.
Oh.
And it was just like, it got me some caring and concern and some, like mothering. And she was really good. I mean, just to be paid some attention to by a female role model. She took me to community health. I got a pregnancy test. Obviously it was negative. There was no immaculate conception going on there. But, I was also the kid who, like, I would own up to my mistakes and take the hit. I wasn't a compulsive liar. But some of those experiences, like, allowed me to maybe empathize with Belle a little bit.
Sure.
In this. But yet she was, like, it was her whole lifestyle.
Yeah.
Her whole identity, not
Well, I
doing
think
it here
too,
and
her
there.
lack of, I wonder if her lack of taking any kind of accountability is there. I've said it before. I think there's a major disconnect with social media. Yeah, you put things out there, or yeah, you comment on somebody's stuff, but you're a keyboard warrior in so many cases, right?
It's just words on a screen. It's not real.
It's cyberspace. Yeah. What harm can be done?
Right.
And it's like, well, a child who had major health conditions was listening to you and looking up to you, and you were her source of inspiration, and it was all a lie. And so I do think that that maybe plays a role as well.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. So what are your thoughts overall on this one?
I mean, I think it's sad. And
Have you ever followed an influencer?
No.
I couldn't name one.
No.
That's not like a
I think the only things, and I wouldn't consider them influencers, although they will market to some extent, like the Holderness family, because they do the parodies, the funny songs they parody, and but they never portray themselves as perfect, even though they look like they're pretty happy, healthy, kind of awesome family. But I guess I just don't have delusions that anybody's perfect.
Yeah.
Because I know better. Because you can put your best face forward, and most of us do and try to all the time. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but nobody is perfect. Mm-hmm. And so just keeping that in mind. But yeah, I'm not a big one on like following people. They're probably the ones where if I see like a clip of theirs pop up, I will often click on it. But they're pretty harmless. And I don't know how much influencing they're doing. They just became really popular over COVID when everybody was home, and they were doing their husband and wife. He used to be like a sports anchor back in the day. They're in one of the Carolinas, and he's super talented, like musically. So he'll take these songs and do like Weird Al, make it modern, make it funny. And again, pretty harmless stuff. So, and they do a lot of making fun of themselves and that type of thing. So if I'm following anybody, it's kind of them, but even that I'm not doing very often.
And I know like my daughter has followed some like makeup artists and things like that. I don't know that I ever will do something like that. But I do. we were in Florida not too long ago, a couple months ago, and we were at Universal Studios and at the beach. And sure enough, like every 5 minutes, you've got someone stopping, like where they've got a photographer and they're taking like 27 different poses. And especially on the beach, like you are not going to get me posting pictures of me in a bikini on a beach. Like it's just never going to happen. But I was flabbergasted. I'm like, this really is our
world
like,
we're in.
Yeah, I'm aging myself, right? But it just, and God like my girlfriend, shout out Alicia, that girl is the selfie goddess.
Yeah.
I still don't. Yeah, she's got it down to a science. So I still tell my husband, if I die early, you've got to go to Alicia because she's the only one that's got all the pictures of me because I just stay away from cameras. And she'll delete all the bad ones. So there's only good ones. And but like, that's not a skill that I have ever developed or will care to develop. Or
I think a little bit of way back in the day, I remember Charles Barkley took a lot of heat for making a comment about saying, I'm not a role model.
I remember that.
Do you remember that? Yeah. And I remember at the time, I probably was even a teenager at the time when he made that comment. And I remember kind of being like, what a jerk. Like, you're being looked up to. Like, come on. I actually have come to kind of find Charles Barkley endearing. I think he's funny. Yeah. And I appreciate his honesty. But as I've gotten older, I'm like, exactly. Can you aspire to be a great athlete like the ones that you see playing professional ball? Absolutely. But shouldn't the people we emulate be the people that we know personally as being, the teachers and the music instructors and the people in our own circles
have morals and
yes, and who we know, and not just a perception of them that we get to see that is on television
or the ones on television that make $70 bajillion a year and still flop around and throw holy tantrums because they're not getting their way. I mean, come on.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of where I put kind of the influencers now, is just that, in a way, like that person that you really only know the public perception, the public image that they show you, and you just have to be mindful of that. And I, even with my own kids, my son loves tractors still, even as a teenager, thinks tractors are amazing. And he knows somebody who has made money off of playing the tractor simulator video game that he likes.
You should talk to Chad. Chad's made money gaming.
This is true. But I'm like, he is one of probably 10 million people who have played that same game. Like, be realistic, And it's not that it's not possible, but it's very, 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 very rare. Just keep that in mind.
Well, he has better odds than at the way to play in the lottery.
True.
That's what I put in my head every time I'm writing a grant. That's taking me
should I just go
weeks.
Play poker?
I'm like, no, I'm like, well, when I look at how many people are going to apply for this, I still have a better odds of getting awarded this grant than I do winning the lottery.
As long as it's not, I have a better chance of being struck by lightning. As long as that's not the odds we're going for, then we're okay. Okay. Once we hit that, stop writing the grants.
If you hear that come out of my mouth, intervene, please. Okay.
I mean, I'm just saying. Let's take a break. We'll be right back and wrap up the Escape Pod. At One Heart, transforming lives begins with safe, stable housing and a support system that allows people to reach their true potential. It requires motivation, mentorship, and a myriad of services. It takes time and treasure, but it's worth it because it's working. One Heart provides people with a sense of security, opportunities for economic advancement, and adds dozens to the workforce each year. Learn more about why One Heart works at oneheartrc.org. Before we go today, Charity, escaping to...
No, Julie escaping to.
I think I'm going to try to escape to a couple of episodes of shows that, because I'm never home in the evening now, I think I found them for free, so I don't have to download something. So I love two shows on ABC, Abbott Elementary and Will Trent. So one's on a Tuesday,
This is me
one's
not
on a
watching
Wednesday.
TV ever, so I've not heard of either of them.
Abbott Elementary makes me so happy. Will Trent is a pretty far-fetched, like, crime, whatever, but the characters are cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, and that's based on a book, and so I'm tempted. I think I might have to find the book and see, like, how close all the stories and characters are. But yeah, so I think I found, because I try not to like add services. I try not to stream if I don't have to.
Yeah.
So, but I think I can just watch them for free. I think.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Well, knock yourself out.
I mean, the fact that I'm never home in the evening really limits what you can watch when you don't stream stuff. Just saying.
Well,
sorry.
No, I get it. I don't even know what I'm going to escape to because again, my husband's out of town. So I told him I was going to be partying it up and just living large while he was gone. He didn't buy it.
His response?
You're going to be writing a grant.
And you're like, yep.
Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, it's what I do in my evenings because now I don't feel like it's taking away from him.
Yeah.
So I worked all last night, and then problem with doing that is that I'm wired then, and then I struggled to get to sleep. And I'm like, so then I put on an old show that I read all the books, and then I started watching the Netflix series of right out of my head.
I can't even guess.
Outlander. Outlander, maybe?
Is that on Netflix?
Is that what it's called? Oh my gosh. See, this is just like me forgetting that I wrote a grant.
Is it the time traveler? Is it like a time traveling story? Yeah, I think it's Outlander.
Oh, it's Outlander. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I couldn't remember. I was just like, I know there's a new season coming up. I haven't watched it in a very long time, like probably a couple of years. And so I just went back, and of course it resumes where you left off. Mm-hmm. I hadn't even finished this last season. So I think season 6 is coming out. I hadn't even finished season 5. So I just pushed play and started watching it, kind of got right back into it. But then this episode was horrific. Like there was a rape scene that I just could not.
Can't handle it.
So I'm just bawling, and I'm like, my God, this is not what I needed.
You're like, I need to
12 hours of grant writing today. So
I need to calm down, not get angry and sad.
No. So it's definitely going to be Schitt's Creek because that's my go-to.
You're pretty safe with that.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it.
Okay. Outlander. If I'm going to either watch the show or read the book, which do I do? I am a limited time mom of 2.
Well, these books are like, each book is like 3 inches thick.
Okay.
So
which one's
depends.
better? Because I've heard the show is genuinely, legitimately good.
Is genuinely good, and it really does follow the books quite closely. So I think all you would get with the books versus the show is probably more like side layers and backstory that maybe just don't need to be when you're watching something versus reading something.
True.
But she's also a very good writer, so it's a very enjoyable, comprehensive read. She's a very good writer.
Very cool. All right.
Other than that, just
hanging out by yourself.
Well, like tomorrow, I only have one meeting, so he's going to call me, and I'm just going to stay home and write. And then I'm hoping to escape this weekend too. There's one day that's supposed to be 100% sun.
Yeah, I saw that.
But also, I will still be sitting in my south-facing office in the sun writing the grant.
We'll take a break and go get some vitamin D. For the rest of you listening, thank you so much. Please rate, review, subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. Please. And also share. It will help us gain some exposure, and just know that this podcast is just a little side project that ultimately could be supporting a much larger mission to help people overcome crisis and achieve self-sustainability.
Yes, and we're actually excited next week, I believe, next episode, right? You're going to hear.
The next one that we will release. Yeah. The next couple, you're going to hear from 2 guests.
2 of our guests on campus that agreed to tell their amazing stories very different backgrounds, very different.
Yeah.
But it'll give you a sense of like just how comprehensive and intensive what we do here is and what it's producing. And these people are taking advantage of every single piece of that and are just doing some
They're awesome.
Phenomenal things. We're so, so, so proud of them, and we think you will be too.
They have escaped some hard stuff. So, yeah, if you're listening to this episode first, go find the other ones, just so you know. You can check out our website, escapepod.live. Follow us on our socials. Reach out at justbecause@escapepod.live or share your story of escape with us to possibly be shared on a future episode.
Yeah, like good
I can never save that line at one time
with us in a future episode. But like today, influencer. Have you been screwed over by an influencer? Have you been wrongfully or misled by an influencer? That would be great. You've escaped that. You realize that, anything like that. Just when you're vulnerable and you're able to overcome, or you're seeking help in overcoming that kind of situation, those are the kinds of stories that I think can help be a source of inspiration for other people.
Absolutely. And to do that, write into Escape Artist at escapepod.live. We are closing the hatch on this episode of the Escape Pod. Remember, trauma may be inevitable. How you grapple with it is optional.
So stay resilient
and keep laughing.